I don't think so.
Take a seat. We would be honored if you would join us.
We made it. The Acolyte. Full season's here. Yo, we made it to 50 episodes.
Dang.
There's some statistic that only 10% of podcasts or 1% of podcasts make it to 20 episodes. I wonder how many make it to 50. This one did. Enough about us. We're here to talk about Star Wars. We're here to talk about the Acolyte. And I can't believe it, but with me in the flesh, the power of one, the power of two, the power of Cameron Porter.
What's up? Glad to be back.
I'm glad you're back. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm Tyler Bodkins. I like to blow things up because I like to blow things up. Dude, yeah, I missed our weekly hangs in here. It felt strange doing it online or doing it with Kayla because y'all are not the same. I noticed this when we were potting.
Visually, we are quite not the same.
Very different. But yeah, man, I'm glad you're back.
Same.
I'm excited to talk about the Acolyte. It's so strange. Obviously we'll get way into it, but opening remarks, I'll say this. The Acolyte is not what I thought it was, And we were warned, I'll put it in air quotes, about that whenever it was coming out. And as I reflect back, it's just we called some stuff, for sure. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's just man, this is not what I was expecting. And as someone who likes to go into things very open with as few preferences as I can manage, I am glad that is the way that I am because, it went way different than I thought, but ultimately it was very gratifying for me. So what about you? Just quick overall thoughts of the Acolyte, which we'll of course talk more about, and we're going to get into the finale for sure, but talk to me about it.
I also did not know what to expect, and it's not what I thought it was. So I'll
right.
That's the top of my list as far as sentiments of the show. I'm eager to give it a rewatch, back to back to back.
Yeah.
Because I feel I hope it'll play out a bit more cohesively for me, to watch it back, just all in sequence. But I don't know. There was a lot to unpack to the entire show. A lot of opinions, a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, a lot of things that kind of probe at your brain a little bit.
Right.
So yeah, I'm still kind of in the processing phase, I think.
Let's talk about, before we get into our thoughts about this episode, let's kind of talk about the opinions. This show, more than any show that I can think of and anything Star Wars I can remember, it just feels like it's just everywhere you turn is just opinions, which I mean, of course, hey, we have opinions. We're sharing our opinions.
Yeah.
This just feels like, I don't know, sometimes it felt like a battle out there. I didn't know there was a war going on, but apparently there is.
I would argue that this is probably the most hated Star Wars project ever.
It's so interesting.
It certainly seems that way. I saw comments of people that are huge sequel haters,
right,
begging for the return of Rian Johnson. Bring him back.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Well, that's interesting too, because I feel like that this show, if I were to say, which again, maybe we're barking up the same tree. If it reminds me of anything in the Disney era, it's The Last Jedi, for sure. That's where I get the most parallels.
Yeah. Even visually, even the color scheme, the tone, the brightness level, if that makes sense.
Which Leslie Headland, one of her earlier jobs was working under Rian Johnson.
Oh, really?
She's the one that probably has the most of a direct tie to him. And I can see a lot of the similarities for sure. And maybe everyone else can too. Maybe that's what a lot of this arguing is about. It's really interesting. I'll share this, and then we're gonna get into what's coming for the podcast, because the show's the Acolyte's over. It's over. There's no more new Star Wars coming out until it seems like holiday season. I'd bet like Thanksgiving. Is probably when the Skeleton Crew will start to air.
Yeah.
But your boys are still going to be here, so we'll talk about that and what that might look like. We still ourselves are a tad unsure, but we got some listener feedback. We'll play that, and then we'll talk about what's coming. But I do want to share, because I haven't talked to you about this, Cameron, and I have a question for our audience. So I've been doing a lot of YouTube shorts and posting reels, and then I was like, hey, TikTok, sure. I had this interesting interaction with this Star Wars fan who, I won't go word for word, beat for beat, but he doesn't like the Acolyte. We'll just say it like that. He doesn't like the Acolyte.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, if you don't like the Acolyte, I have no real feelings about that, other than I hope that there are other things that you find joy in. Like, like if it's not to you, there are a lot of things that are just not to our taste.
Sure.
And that feels completely normal, completely fine. Certainly doesn't bother me if I take in something and it's not to my taste. Just kind of like move along.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of like Facebook arguments, or it's like everybody's got a really, really strong opinion, and it's like this never-ending cycle of battling with the other side to try to convince them of something that
this is great,
that they're not interested in being convinced of, and your attempt makes them dig in even deeper.
So let me bring what you just said back into this as I tie it up. I don't remember what the original comment was, but days later he came back to the video and was like, name one thing you like about this show. Almost like he just couldn't believe that I actually am enjoying
like there was even one thing that you could,
So I listed quite a few, and I'd mentioned what I mentioned on this very pod many times. Like, I really love a lot of the philosophical ideas that Leslie is exploring.
Okay.
Like, a lot of it reminds me of things that George has talked about. I think, while I may not be, quote unquote, the best at breaking these ideas down, I do my best, and I am always learning and growing, and, that is what it is. And when I mentioned that, he had said, well, I don't see any of that on the screen. I think you're just seeing what you want to see.
Yeah.
This is his critique of me, apparently. And I said, sure. I think that maybe the same is true for you. I think we bring our lived experiences into the things that we're taking in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any other way to be.
Yeah.
We're all doing that. And in that way, it makes sense when one person may love something and another person might hate it. Of course, we're bringing in different things. And the conversation sort of went back and forth, and I could tell that it was, I'll say it like this, it was definitely a one-sided argument.
Yeah.
I didn't really have any intention to argue, and it felt like what you were saying, like it was trying to be this Facebook argument. And in the end, I think maybe I gave him an Obi-Wan quote, and we were both about our days, and, I haven't heard from him since, but I say that to say, it's very interesting, the discourse around this show, and the fact that it seems like, in some ways, like you can't either like something or hate something without the other side doing what you're saying, trying to convince you.
Yeah.
My experience more and more is this. I'm not out to convince anybody anything.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I think and what I like. The things that I don't like, I even had someone ask me the other day, don't you have a single criticism of the show? I could. I don't know what good it does. I don't know what good. Leslie's not tuning in. Kathleen Kennedy's not tuning in. Filoni's not tuning in. Not only that, but just for me, myself, I learn more and more. And don't worry, we're tying this up. But I learn more and more that just like the things I dwell on absolutely create the experience that I have in life. This isn't just Star Wars, this is everything. And so, I choose to focus on the things that I like. I don't know if it was on the pod or if it was after, but Kayla said the very same thing. She's like, it's just more fun to focus on the things you enjoy. And so if you don't like the Acolyte, of course, we've said it before, you're welcome here. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like the Acolyte, I would encourage you, go watch the Star Wars you love,
I think this show was the catalyst. I think if any other show had come out 8 weeks ago, I would ask you or anyone listening, do you think it would have got the same amount of backlash as this show? For the sake of what I've seen throughout the fandom is a growing frustration with Disney Star Wars since the sequel trilogy.
Right.
Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan show, just this growing like frustration, this growing feeling of like being unheard or feeling like people that don't have the knowledge are handling something that you hold so closely. I think the Acolyte just happened to be the catalyst that kind of sent everybody over the edge. And it wasn't just like blanket anger or like dissatisfaction. I think it was that plus this unifying feeling where it's like, oh, now there's millions of us that are like against this. It's like there was unity, or like, you know, Misery Loves Company. There was like unity in the fact that this is a project that was so unanimously disliked by at least some of the avenue or some of the areas in the fandom that I kind of like keep a finger on the pulse of. So I think it more so had to do with just the timing of it, maybe, than actually, you know, we watch Star Wars looking for things to be positive about, but you look, it depends a lot on the lens through which you look.
Yes. Yeah. I think the quote that I said was the truths that we so often cling to greatly depend on our point of view. That's Obi-Wan and Empire to Luke, you know?
Yeah.
And it can seem like that's just like a scapegoaty sort of response, but you know, as far as I can tell, it's true.
Yeah.
I'll say this too. I mean, I hear that if someone thinks this isn't the Star Wars that I want, and you know, all these emotions, I get it. Star Wars is important to you. I can understand that. I'll say a couple things. One, as someone who is creative, and I consider creativity a lot. I think about it every day. I'm thinking about it almost every hour of every day. It encompasses my entire life. And I will say this. There's creator and then there's the audience. And audience can have preference. Audience can have taste. And I'm going to asterisk it and I'll come back. But at the end of the day, creators should do what they feel beholden to. Sure, if you're playing in a sandbox like Star Wars, there are things to consider. But hear me out. The thing you love about Star Wars is not the same thing I love about Star Wars. It's what we're saying. It's this idea of we all have different things we like. So you can look at Leslie Headland and say, she doesn't get Star Wars because she doesn't understand what I like about Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's what she likes about Star Wars. And I'll say this. If you feel so passionately about the fact that creators in Star Wars are not doing it justice, maybe the reason why you're feeling that, maybe you should make Star Wars. I'm being serious.
Yeah.
Maybe you should make Star Wars. Maybe you're a writer and you should be writing a Star Wars comic. Maybe you're a editor and you should be editing episode 10. You know, a lot of times I think that's it. I'll say, you know, as a musician is my primary thing. There was a season of time when I wasn't really digging into my creative and I was being so critical about music that I was hearing everywhere. Well, this could have been better if it was like this. This could have been better if it's like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, at the end of the day, it was really just coming out of this thing that I was unfulfilled in.
Sure.
And so, you know, I think a lot of it's that. And yes, also, what did I say? Creators' visions should be followed through and met. Sometimes something as big as Star Wars being controlled by a company like Disney, I don't doubt that there's studio meddling that happens, of course.
Yeah.
And yes, sometimes you can see those seams and I don't like it, but in some way it is what it is. And you can let that frustration, that anger, all that, you can let it fester if you would like.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're the one that walks around with it. Not Kathleen Kennedy, not Disney, not any, you know. So again, it's not a condemnation. It's more of just like this idea of, I don't know, find the Star Wars you like, try to take in what the Star Wars is that you're getting, try to pull out the things that you like and the things that you don't. I don't really exactly know what to say. For me, I just kind of like it's not even that I ignore it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So we'll pop off that. The reason why I brought all that up was this. I don't know if anybody found our podcast through a TikTok or a reel or a YouTube short. I'll say this. I don't know that I want to do them. They take a good bit of time, and I don't know that I want to do them if all I'm doing is getting people that are hate watching Star Wars, hate watching our YouTube videos. Yeah. So if you found us through those reels, through a TikTok, if that's how you found the pod, please do me a favor and just email starwarsafterparty@gmail.com and say, yep, that's how I found y'all. Then I'll know it's working, and I'll keep devoting time. If I don't get any responses, then I'm not making TikTok. Okay. Yeah. So that's really why I was getting on that tangent. Now let's play a little bit of listener feedback. This is from V, and V has written in quite a bit, and there's always great points. So we're going to go ahead and play that real quick. Reminder to anybody that calls in:
you are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master.
Hey, Star Wars After Party, it's V calling in. I know how you guys said you wanted call-ins. Honestly, not too much speculation for this episode, just because I've seen everything from rumors about getting a bad rubbery prosthetic Plagueis and Tenebris to rumors that there won't be anything. So I think they've done a good enough job keeping a wrap on the finale that could be anything. But most importantly, thank you guys for running an awesome show. And I can't wait to see what you guys cover for the time in between Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. Looking forward to lots more Star Wars After Party. All right. Be safe out there. Bye.
Nice.
All right.
Thanks,
nice.
V.
Thanks, V. So not a lot of speculation, which probably
Fair.
wise, because
I resonate with that.
We didn't really. We did get Plagueis. We did not get Plagueis. We didn't get a weird plasticky looking. We'll talk about it. I thought Plagueis looked awesome, but we'll get there. Let's talk about the last part of that message. What are we going to be doing in between the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew? I haven't thought about it much because I got some ideas, but I've been in the Acolyte.
Yeah.
Next week we are definitely going to do like a season We're going to talk about the whole season of the show. I think that feels like that's definitely what's coming. So please do stay tuned, stay subscribed, all that stuff. Next week we're going to do that for sure. Beyond that, we'll come up with some stuff and we'll talk. Usually we try to follow where the Force is leading us. Mm-hmm. Generally there's some idea, something that pops up and we're like, we definitely need to discuss that.
Yeah.
Seems like maybe the Plagueis novel would be a good idea at some point.
That's a good idea.
There's some stuff leading up to Skeleton Crew. I imagine we're going to start to see trailers of that soon, which might open up other avenues. We're going to get there. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
There's a Star Wars game coming out next month, Star Wars Outlaws.
Yep.
So there's going to be plenty for us to chat about, but stay tuned. Stay subscribed. I think that's mainly it.
Yeah, I think a good recap on the whole season would be a good way to kind of bookend this arc of After Party.
Yeah, I think so. So we'll definitely be doing that for episode 51, and we'll keep going beyond that. At some point, where I need to figure out some logistical things, and we need to really plan it out. But there will be a trial. The Jedi will be on trial, and I'll tell you what. The prosecuting side, which I think is going to probably end up being your boy, is going to have a lot of extra ammo after this episode. There's a lot of things that we are going to be able to enter into evidence.
Yeah.
So Gager is going to have his work cut out for him when we bring him on. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Other than that, I feel like it's time. Let's get into the episode proper.
You're listening to Star Wars After Party. We're honored that you would join us. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube for video and wherever you get your podcasts for audio. If you would like to help the pod grow, consider sharing with the Star Wars fans in your life. In addition, leaving 5 stars on Apple or Spotify, giving the video a like, or leaving a comment on YouTube.
You want to do that on this one, or
helpful.
wait?
Written reviews are the best way to help the podcast reach new listeners. We appreciate your support. Lastly, we want to hear from you. Record a voice memo on your phone and send it over to starwarsafterparty@gmail.com. Written email works too. Now, back to the after party.
All right, thanks KB137. We're talking to Acolyte, Season 1, Episode 8, titled The Acolyte, written by Jason Mikolev. I think that's how you say it. directed by Hanel D. Culpepper. And let's just jump right in, this opening scene. OSHA's got the helmet on. We pick up kind of where episode 6 led off.
Yep.
And
7.
No, 6.
Was this?
Because 7 was a flashback.
Picking
up.
I was just checking to make sure you were.
I know what you were
like,
doing.
paying attention.
You were just testing me. It's what
it's like Master Soul.
It's what
doing.
any good master would do to their people. I get it. So it picks up where that leaves off, and OSHA's got the mask on, and she's tapping into something. She's seeing something, and she unknowingly kind of like takes over Chimere.
Yeah,
and Chimere's like freaking. Let's just talk about that as she brings the helmet off. I don't know if you call this detail. You see the reflection in her eyes of a red saber.
Ooh.
And it's the reflection of the final scene
future.
with her and Soul. But let's talk about that.
Dang.
So
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, that seems to be what's there, as far as I can tell. Because at first I thought it was Sith eyes.
Yeah.
But on the second watch, I was like, no, that's a red saber. And it's what she kind of described. She goes on to say, I see May. I see her kill Soul. Mm-hmm. She's got a saber, but she doesn't use it.
Yeah.
In other words, she kills a Jedi without using a weapon.
Right.
But misread the prophecy was because it ended up not being May, ended up being OSHA. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on that scene in regards to like Chimere, everything?
I want to know. So I think an overall theme of this show is that I just walk away wanting to know so much more.
Yeah.
I want to know more about this whole power that Mother Anastasia has over Torben that kind of mimics this power that OSHA shows on Chimere.
Right.
With the black eyes, kind of locking him in a memory or transporting his mind to something else, like outside of him. I want to know what that power is and how it's even being used, because obviously there's some connection to it that OSHA has,
right, that
is so subconscious that she doesn't even recognize it.
Right.
It was like the second that all of her other senses were muted and it was just her and the Force, that was straight to where her mind went. So there's something locked away in her, an inclination towards a power from that coven, or something that she learned that she's kind of like trauma blocked the memory of. There's something there that needs to be explored more.
Right. And, we'll talk about it season 2, but that's a great point. I didn't think about that the fact that it was when she shut off all of her other senses that subconsciously this thing came out.
It was like the first thing. I mean, she was like, her overwhelming emotion was fear, but that's how it manifested itself.
Yeah.
It was like, it completely shut down whoever was around her.
By the way, I think that was Chimere's reaction too. I think he was freaking.
Oh, yeah.
You kind of see him in this other world. It was almost kind of like Lord of the Rings-esque, like whenever they go into, I don't properly know what it's called, but it's almost like the netherworld type thing where everything kind of goes gray, and
or it's like the upside down.
It's almost like the upside down,
yeah.
Stranger Things. I think all of that is probably some kind of allusion to the subconscious, and it seems like that's where they went. And we see Chimere in the quote unquote real world with his eyes blacked out, but when he was in whatever that was, you could tell he was definitely. As much as he embraces the dark side, I think even for him it was a bit much. So that power, whatever it is, like, it's wild.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool that, I don't know, I didn't expect for every question mark to be answered. I feel like we got enough of the plot. Like, we know now who the Acolyte is. We know what happened 16 years ago. Like, we've got a pretty good idea of the big mysteries that were sort of laid out. But it's kind of cool that there's apparently all this other stuff that we just really are only beginning. By the way, I got way more questions after this episode. There's some stuff that happens. I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Interesting opening scene. And I don't know. It just everything about it, I was locked in. I was just locked in from the get-go. We transition out of this and we see May and Soul. And, he's got her locked up. Once again, he's about to say some crazy truth that's going to blow our minds. And, He gets interrupted.
Yeah.
Soul gets interrupted in like every episode. I feel like it's
Yeah.
kind of like a thing that seems to keep happening. But what did you think about the asteroid field scene? You know, a little ship action. What are your thoughts?
I was honestly, I was a little bit underwhelmed by that scene.
Yeah, I could see that.
It kind of, and I will say there was a theme throughout this episode for me, and maybe in other episodes prior to, where things happened in such a way that felt it felt like forced or like overacted, if that's a term.
Yeah, it's definitely a term.
And it
yeah.
like it almost like kind of took me out of it a little bit. Like I think some of the sequences in that asteroid field, like some of May's motions or some of the ways that she was responding in her ship, it just kind of like it kind of took me out of it a little bit. I will say the sequence of Soul, man, like I had such high hopes for him as a character, and then they did him so dirty with the ways that he was like, I mean, between the bridge thing, unable to hold both sides of it and save both of them, between not being able to sense initially that it was May and not Osha, like I don't know. I know we started out talking about him as like kind of like a Qui-Gon-esque character, and I definitely still see that, but it's almost like he's almost like the comic relief Qui-Gon, or like the comic book version, or the cartoon caricature. I just that the scene of him getting shocked by her and then like running and then stopping running and then saying her name and then starting running again. It just
right. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I was like, to me, and this is like where one of those things where, at least the way I interpret it, is like it's a TV show.
Yeah.
There has to be some sort of drama, some sort of suspension of disbelief, because I certainly had the thought during one of my watch throughs, like, of course he would have caught her.
Sure.
But she had to get away because that was what the story said. So, yeah, maybe it's like an execution thing.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a world in which he just gets knocked out completely.
Yeah.
But then you do that. Now there's less of a, will she make it out or will she not? Like, you know, there's... Either way you do it, another problem could arise.
Sure,
so,
yeah.
You know, maybe there's less drama, there's less tension if he just passes out. I don't know. During that scene, I'll come back to what I think about why Soul is not Qui-Gon, and therefore, ultimately, like what holds him back from being the great Jedi that he could be.
Oh, well, it's obvious. Soul has black hair and Qui-Gon has brown hair.
Yeah, it could be
I
that.
just solved it for you.
I have a different theory that ties into literally the entire narrative of the show, but it could be the hair. I'll give you that. In this scene, again, I'm just going to drop a breadcrumb. I'll pick it back up here in a sec. Basil was acting strange because Basil almost seemed like he was on May's side, not Soul's. Did you notice that? Like, he seemed like instead he was trying to make it so that Soul didn't kill May, that Soul didn't capture her. Like, he seemed like he was on May's side.
Yeah.
Go back, rewatch, tell me if I'm crazy, but that was the impression I got. I have a theory as to why, but it didn't come until later, so I'll hold it.
Okay.
At this point, we see this guy, Raincourt, and it seems like everybody knows about Vernestra's, you know, hyperspace sickness. Is your stomach okay? She's like, it's actually my head, thank you. Yes, I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's just funny. It's like, how does everybody know about this? You know, it's just like an open secret. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, that was another thing that like really just like kind of threw me for a loop. Like, why are we talking about Jedi
I guess
having
they were trying
tummy?
to remind us like that she has this thing with hyperspace that, and what it is, it's in the comics and the novels. Like she basically she has visions when she goes in hyperspace, and it's just uncomfortable. And I think that's like those visions. I think are something that she's trying to ignore. You know, like okay, bring it into the real world for a sec. People talk about bad trips when they do certain, you know, psychedelics and stuff.
Sure.
Kind of like, you know, the spice that Boba Fett had whenever, it's kind of like that.
With the little lizard
and like
guy.
a lot of it comes down to like your mindset and like how you know, how controlling you're trying to be. And that's what I think's happening with Vernestra.
Ooh,
These visions are trying to show her something, but she's not trying to see it.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to deal with it. So she's having bad trips because she's not giving in to what the Force is trying to do. The Force is trying to show her something.
Yeah.
And she's just being very resistant to it.
Well,
so,
even simpler than that, think about like all of the plates that she's trying to like keep spinning at all times.
Yeah.
She's got all these narratives going on. She's trying to keep this from these people and that from it's
What a tangled web
puts-
we weave when at first we do deceive.
yeah,
Something like that.
yeah. It's like
same idea.
she's got a whole bunch of stuff that she's trying to keep. You said it perfectly. She's trying to control so much.
Right.
So
It's all about
it's like
control.
your dreams or your sleep patterns, like those things being connected to like your life and the things that you have going on. It
Interesting.
can be
Yeah.
man, and that ties into where we're going next into this, but like it can cause you to come to a breaking point.
Sure. So I kind of like Raincourt. I'm gonna be real. I know I'm not. Gager's like, of course you do, but no, it's just that I liked the character. His hair looked really cool. He's just a cool guy. I get it. He's like, you think this is a personal vendetta? It's not that. It's that you seek to control something that can't be controlled. And Vernez says the Force. He's like, no,
This
emotions. It's so good, man. I mean, it was good.
there were two scenes in this episode that were my favorites. And this is one of them. And I wrote this down because I wanted to go over this quote because I thought it was such a perfect. It kind of felt like such a good middle ground between you and Gager, kind of. And like those two ideas, and me being the people pleasing nature to try to mediate between everybody
So
around me.
Gager and I are up on the bridge, and you're just trying to hold us both up.
Yeah, yeah. But instead
who you letting drop?
Instead of
Bro.
trying to hold up two
Bro.
500-pound bridges, I'm going to pick up the two
All right,
150.
I've heard this
so
critique. And you know what I think it is I think that you no, I was gonna say you maybe he didn't want to control them, like so he was trying to hold the thing. I don't know.
support. Yeah, maybe.
You know, because like it's one, you're holding up this thing. Another, you're literally holding a person. You're controlling a person, literally. But no, because Indara helped that person come down in the first episode. You know what I think it is? It's a great point, but like he was probably just. I think the answer is a lot simpler than that. He was just overcome by his emotions, man.
Yeah,
he was just overcome by his emotions.
Yeah.
You're right. He should have thought of that, except for he didn't because he was so. Now we know the way he went into that entire situation. He was carried away. He allowed his emotions to carry him away, and something as simple as that couldn't.
It's funny. It's funny that where we're going with this, or what we've talked about so far about Soul and Qui-Gon or whatever. But it's funny because now my view of Soul has changed so much. I look back and I'm like, yeah, of course the dummy was focusing on the bridges instead. It's almost like I had this idea of him as being this like super wise, well-seasoned master, but we go back. Soul was marked by this event that happened in his career as a Jedi so early on, and now he's been fighting against it and the lie that he's been telling and all this.
Yes.
So, anyways, it
this
makes
is the point of the show, by the way.
Yeah.
It's about a lot of things, but one of them is you can't idolize heroes like this because when you do, when you have so much faith in them, you miss the fact that they're flawed as well. And if we hold people up on certain pedestals, they begin to believe their own hype. And by the way, this is true of you yourself. It's true of me. It's true of all of us.
Well, this is what the guy said a minute ago who you named that I'm about to read a quote of that I can't remember what his name was. The senator. Rancor. I'm going to think of Rancor.
It's kind of like Rancor. I spelled it out. RAYENCOURT.
Yeah.
Rancor.
But he said something like, when people are looking to heroes, they're not looking at what's in front of them.
Yes.
It's like, they're people are idolizing the Jedi instead of recognizing the issues in front of them. They're like, well, they'll take care of it. They'll save us.
The inverse is also true. You're criticizing other people without realizing that there are things that you yourself can be working on. Yeah. By the way, these Star Wars shows can be better. Okay. How's your life? Could your life be better?
Yeah.
One you have control over, one you have none over. I'm just saying, this is the problem. This is one of the big reasons why I don't like criticism. Mm-hmm. I had a quick anecdote. A mutual friend of ours has a friend, and this friend, long story short, fell at work, busted his head open, ended up kind of like, I'll just throw it out there, like making some bad decisions, quit his job on the spot, did some things that are like, if I listed them, you'd be like, highly questionable.
Holy smokes.
And when my friend said, he said, hey man, are you okay? Guy responded, why don't you worry about your own self? And in a way, he's not wrong. Let the guy make his mistakes. Allow him to worry about himself.
Yeah.
I think eventually he'll figure it out. It's not saying that you can't be concerned for people that are close
Sure.
to you. Help people when they ask. Certainly. But allow people to come to it themselves and remember that the same is true for you. There are things in your life, there's things in my life that I'm aiming to work on. And me going around and criticizing this person, that, this show, that show, this song, this album, I don't know, man. It's just, there's other things. It's what you're saying. It goes both ways.
In conclusion, Tyler Bodkins of Star Wars After Party podcast is saying to you, listener, if you don't like Star Wars, it's actually a problem with your own life.
I'm saying that I have found that to be true about myself in certain times.
Yeah.
Generally, a critique that I would levy to someone, I could almost always reverse it and see where I could apply it in my life. It's almost like I'm always just talking to myself in some way.
Well, it's like that old saying of like, you can't be happy for someone else unless you're happy yourself or happy with yourself. But anyways.
So give us this quote, because I know you got it down. It's a great quote.
Yeah, Senator Rancor was standing there talking to Vernestra, and I just love... He said, I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power posing as a religion, a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable. And she says, we don't claim to control the Force. And he says, not the Force, your emotions. You project an image of goodness and restraint, but it's only a matter of time before one of you snaps.
If I were to have a critique, it's right there in that moment. I would have liked to have heard a...
Yeah.
Yeah. This is it. What?
This is the issue between how the Jedi are being portrayed right now.
Yeah.
And the reality of who they are and the state of the galaxy and why things got to the point they did in the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
When everything collapsed is because he's absolutely right.
Right.
It's an unchecked power that gets paraded around as these like defenders of the galaxy,
messianic figures in a lot of ways, literally with Anakin.
Yeah. And you get so like indoctrinated that that's who you are, that it's very similar to like
it's very similar to the story of Dune, by the way.
People really,
where
I almost watched that on my flight back
to slight
South
spoiler
Carolina.
alert, he's a messiah figure, and you begin to see towards the end like maybe this guy isn't like perfect. He's actually doing some questionable stuff.
It doesn't allow room for human error, or it doesn't allow room for like personal growth.
Right.
So what is very similar to like high stress careers that take your mental state and stress levels highly into account when you're going into these lawyers, doctors, nurses, people involved in like nuclear engineering divisions and stuff.
Sure.
It creates a culture where you can't really share that you might be cracking a little bit, or you might be breaking, or like things are getting to you, or you're having trouble sleeping. People will go home with chest pain, be sent home from work with chest pains, and have heart attacks and stuff like this all the time. So it makes you think about Vernestra, think about her tummy problems. You think about
it's her head, Cameron.
Whatever. You think about how stuff like that manifests itself, and then you think about all the responsibilities she's holding, all the lies that she's weaving and trying to control narratives of, and then the stigma of being a Jedi.
Right.
So Rancor is exactly right in his critique of this unchecked power. So the Jedi are so defensive that they get really offended by anyone trying to probe into their activities, because it's like, well, we're Jedi, we're in tune with the Force, you don't understand. So it's like there's no real way, or there hasn't been a real way to like navigate how to work through that with a checked power system. So everybody just does this. So it looks like a personal vendetta from him. Vernestra's defensive.
Yes.
So to Gager's point, to your point, everybody is navigating, trying to figure out how to function together in a society. The Jedi look one way, they are another way, the world looks at them another way, and then the show portrays them as another way as well. So
we're many things. We're not just one thing. We're not evil. We're not. This is again another point of the show.
Yeah.
And so it's all there. Now listen, we're getting to the point now. So we're literally 7 minutes into the episode by my notes. So we'll crank it up a bit because we're 40 minutes into the pod. Chimera offers to train Osha. She declines, and he mentions that very different than May. Mm-hmm. And as they go off to Bryndock, we see in the shadows, creeping around, something that we've sort of been speculating this entire time.
It's Luke Skywalker.
This is you jerk. This is why I am really excited to go back and rewatch the season. We see in the background none other than Darth Plagueis. If you're not familiar with Plagueis, if you don't remember his name dropped in episode 3, Darth Plagueis was Emperor Palpatine's master.
Yep.
And up until now, that's the only thing really in canon is just that scene where Palpatine doesn't even really confirm that it's his master, but there is a great book written by James Luceno. I think it was put out in 2012, like right before all the stuff got canonized. So it's like right at the tail end of things that were decanonized. And I just finished listening to it this past week, and if there was one book that they could take out of Legends and make canon, it's that book. There's nothing that would not stand. I don't feel like there's anything that really gets in the way of stories that they could tell. If I was Disney, I'd make it canon. I would put a new cover on it. I would say featured in the new Star Wars TV show, and I would roll it out. I'd re-release it and let it just pop. It's a great book. It's fantastic. And so that's who that is. If you're like, wow, that person looked cool, have no idea who he is, that's who it is. It's Darth Plagueis. I don't know anything else to say other than he looks awesome. I can't wait to see more. We'll talk about that here in a sec when we talk about season 2. But I'm curious to kind of like go back and see, is there anywhere where we can reasonably make a suspicion that Darth Plagueis could be pulling some strings behind the scenes? Because there was no setup for that.
No.
And that's fine. I'm just saying, like, I'm curious if it's like, oh, maybe there.
Yeah, I'm also really surprised and curious as to why they likened him to that scene in that way, just kind of like creeping in the background, almost fearful. Like I almost got like a kind of afraid, just like trying to stay hidden vibe, not necessarily a powerful, I'm overwatching all of this. I'm just curious why they did it that way.
The way I read it was he's staying in the shadows.
Yeah.
And that is, sort of metaphorically what the Sith have been doing. He doesn't want to show himself yet. Mm-hmm. That he's not trying to show himself. And it's not even really fully stated that he's like Chimera's master. He might be, he might not be. It could be that all this stuff happened on Kofar.
Yeah.
And now Plagueis is coming to, suss all this stuff out.
That's a really great point. So, I think it could be that. I think it could be that he's not like
manipulating everything.
Yeah, or he's not even at his like point of power. At this point, he might just be a little Padawan or I mean not a Padawan, but someone who's just dabbling in the dark side. In
the Plagueis book, he is the apprentice to Darth Tenebris.
Okay.
So he is not yet the master. He kills Darth Tenebris, I want to say 35-ish years before the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 30 years, but it's somewhere in that timeline. So we're still 100. Well, I think we're roughly, we did the math early on, maybe 88 years before the Phantom Menace or something like that. And so if that's the case, we're still about 50 years before he kills his master and becomes the master and takes on Palpatine as his apprentice. So
this could be him just like being made aware of this like interesting concept of creating life, like at a very early curiosity point to where later on in his
could be. So let's talk about this next scene. So Sol is looking for May, and he's landed on Bryndock. This is where my theory. I'll make it quick about our boy Basil. When Sol leaves, again, it seemed like he was trying to help May. And when Sol leaves, he kind of sniffs. He goes, he kind of gets an angry look looking at Sol.
Yeah.
I think my theory is that he's sort of like sussing out Force energy. I think that May sort of had a lighter energy about her, and that Sol had a darker energy about him, and that's what was kind of shifting Basil towards Team May and kind of away from Team Soul. That's my theory. You'll hear him do that angry sniff in this next clip, and then you're going to hear Vernestra make this very interesting phone call.
I know he is, but I need to get a message to him. It's urgent.
This is highly unorthodox, but I shall see what I can do.
Now, jump to the end. We know Yoda's in this episode. It could be that was for Master Yoda. That's not the vibe I get.
That's not what I thought. Yeah.
I think that call was to Hugo Damask, a.k.a. Darth Plagueis. That's his public facing. That's his, given name.
Right. Yeah. Because he's like an aristocrat.
I'm starting to wonder if Vernestra could possibly have some time. This is what this show does to us, man. I'm starting to wonder if she's got ties to Plagueis. Because that's just it's a weird call. And I do not get the sense that the person on the other end, listen, I do not get the sense that the person on the other end of that phone call is a Jedi.
No.
I know he is, but I need to get a message to him.
Listen.
It's urgent.
This is highly unorthodox, but I shall see what I can do.
If anything, it sounds like Palpatine, which it's not. It's not.
Yeah, it did sound like Palpatine. It sounds like a politician or an assistant or
just so you know,
something
Hugo
like
Damask,
that.
and he's immune. Obviously, I say obviously if you know what mutants are, and he's a part of a banking clan, and he's very high up, and he has lots of money, lots of connections.
Yeah.
He is ultimately what paid for the clone army, just to give you an idea of his wealth. And so it would make sense that trying to reach out to someone like him, it would be highly unorthodox for that kind of chain of command to happen. So we don't know who's on the other side of that phone call. It's somebody, and I don't really think it's good. So let's get back to Soul over on Brindok. He passes the pit, which, by the way, I think that pit is the Virgins. Kayla as well. She was saying that. So we get to Brindok. OSHA is a mechanic, so she was able to fix that elevator really quick. It was cool that Kymir sort of just found his way up a different way. Again, he flies now, so he flies, so that's a thing. Let's talk about Kymir versus Soul, that hallway scene. I mean, Soul was getting it, but talk to me about that battle. What did you think about Soul versus Kymir?
It was very Matrix-esque.
Yeah,
lots of
sure.
slow-mo, which is kind of like, I will say, like, on my first thought, okay, it started out really strong.
Okay.
And then it got to a point where I was like, the word cheesy kind of crept up in my brain for a second. And this is just me talking through my whole thought process with this. But like, I was like, yeah, that movie was like kind of cheesy or kind of dorky or whatever. And then I thought about watching the prequels when I was younger.
Right.
And how it felt to like watch things that would kind of like seem cheesy, but they're actually like really, really cool. So, I enjoyed it. What about you?
I'm with you. I liked it. There was the one scene right before the cut to May and Osho where he does this, like, he's like heading towards Soul and he goes, zoom, zoom, zoom. And I just thought that was such an interesting and exciting cut.
Yeah.
I liked the battle. I thought it was really cool. We didn't even talk at all last week. I blame it on it being really late and us being virtual. We didn't talk at all about the lightsaber battle last week.
Oh, yeah.
It was awesome. Well, that's all we'll say is it was awesome. Sorry, guys. Sometimes we get carried away. We love lightsabers. Lightsabers are cool. It was, of course, a great battle. This was, I thought, a really cool battle. I liked everything you're describing. I particularly enjoyed it. So in this sort of next scene, we get Osha talking to May. And ultimately, what we get is why Osha left the Jedi Order. We get her failure. Because a couple weeks ago, it was like, she failed. And we're like, how did she fail? Did someone die? Did something? Here's how she failed.
Soul lied to you. He blamed me. Soul never blamed you. He tried to teach me to accept that someone that I love could be capable of this level of destruction. And I failed. I could never learn to calm my negative emotions. My hatred of you, my grief over our mother. So I never became a Jedi. And I guess in the end, you got what you wanted.
She couldn't overcome her hatred, her loss. I mean, she couldn't overcome her dark side. You know, she sought to shut it down. You know, this again, we talk about like the subconscious and the dark and the shadow self. These ideas come up a lot in this show. It comes up a lot in Ahsoka and all versions of Star Wars, including The Empire Strikes Back for sure. And you know, that seems to be what she's getting at here. I love that Soul tried to teach me that someone I loved could be capable of this level of destruction. Interesting. Well, she didn't get that lesson because someone that she loved, aka Soul, was capable of a level of destruction. So I thought that was an interesting parallel.
It's ironic.
What about you?
Yeah, it is very ironic. Yeah.
He could save others from death, but
not himself.
What else about that scene? Anything stick out to you, man?
No, it just kind of pulled things together a lot more for me. That was the reason that she failed. It wasn't because she was necessarily too old or she was unwilling, but she was just incapable of overcoming what brought her there in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Funny how we didn't learn this lesson from this experience with Anakin.
Yeah, right. Well, let's talk about that. So it's around this time that I came to the realization, like, oh, everyone that, and of course, you know, Soul's death coming up, everyone that saw Chimere is dead or their memory's wiped.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do finally get to this end of like, okay, that's how the Sith have been gone for millennia. Like, that's how that line makes sense. The only person that knows, Basil, which is a question mark. No one can understand him, by the way, because everybody takes Wookiee and nobody takes Basil, whatever that language is, which is
started with a T. Yeah,
like
I can't remember.
Or something like that. But except for Yord. That's the funny part, is if Yord lived, you know, whatever. Anyways, Yord, rest in peace.
Yord Horde.
Sorry, Yord Horde. It's at this point that we also finally get like the capital T truth on May and Osha. And May, she fights Soul. She disarms him. She wants him to face the council and face the Senate. She wants, you know, quote unquote, true justice to come out. So let's listen to May and Osha. We're going to learn what is actually going on. Soul finally puts it all on the table.
You are not twins. You and Osha are the same person. I don't know how your mother did it, but it has something to do with the virgins on this planet.
How she did what?
She created life. Your lives.
At this point, Chimere lights up, by the way.
Force to create you and Osha. Do you have any idea what kind of power that is? In the history of the galaxy, very few have been that powerful.
And you killed her. You killed our mother.
Yes.
There it is. We finally get all the truth. All the truth is out.
Yep.
May and Osha are literally one person. Yes, question mark. We don't know what that means. That's a season 2 thing. For sure. Soul admits it. Osha learns the truth.
Yep.
We'll come back to maybe what the two people, and maybe even speculate a little bit about what that means. Let's kind of tie up what happens in this scene. Again, misread the prophecy was, it's not May that kills a Jedi without a weapon. It's Osha.
Yep.
As she does so, she bleeds the lightsaber crystal, which was really cool. I saw some fans upset that that's not what bleeding a lightsaber crystal looks like. I don't know what to say to that. It's been in comics, it's been in books. It was in Jedi Fallen Order. It was done very different in Jedi Fallen Order. I think that's okay. I think that things can happen in different ways. It seemed like a manifestation of all of her power that caused the crystal to bleed.
That moment really sucked me in.
Yeah, I loved it.
I thought it was funny to see lightsabers like with the top sliced off and see the kyber crystal kind of like jumbled up in there. And before we even started this show, I had mentioned something about hoping that we would maybe get to see
I think
a kyber crystal get bled.
Remember that.
Yep.
I do remember that.
Before the Acolyte started, talking about
Cameron,
the red lightsaber and everything. So I was very, very happy to see that. But the way they did it was just so cool. And then when she ignites it, and it was funny. It was like I was like, oh dang, she's bleeding the kyber crystal. And then she lights the lightsaber and it's blue, and I was like,
"Aww!" And then
it starts to eat it up.
So
it was so good, and it really conveyed like her emotional state, and it was able to communicate that level of like anger as she's processing it. Here she just killed this person that she's like seen as so.
His last words, by the way, it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
So
and then
good.
there it was, just a tangible moment of that hatred manifesting.
Small thing I did not notice until I was recording that scene because I was on my computer. I was looking at things a little closer than maybe the TV. I don't know why this is, but it's something I noticed. Go back, rewatch, tell me if I'm crazy. I'm going to notice more of what I'm about to say on the rewatches of the full. I'm going to do a rewatch of the next season before we talk next week.
Mm-hmm.
In any time the Jedi were interacting with the witches apparently would breathe and no breath would come out. The Jedi would breathe and breath would come out.
Weird.
I don't know if that's like a sign of like life, like the light side, like create, like that's the light side versus the dark side. In this scene, there is no breath coming out until he admits that he killed her mother, and May lets out a breath in a little piece. You can just see her breath for the first time.
Dang.
And I don't know what that's trying to say artistically, but go back and watch it. I'm going to pay attention. We're going to talk about that next week for sure. But there's something going on there. There's something about breath and how you see breath again. And just the fact that May was finally able to breathe. Like once it was acknowledged, like actually, you're not crazy. This guy did kill your mother. It wasn't you. It's not your fault. The truth is finally out. She started breathing. She started living. Maybe.
Yeah.
Like she, a lot of times there's this idea of that once you embrace both sides, yourself and your shadow self, that's when you can truly begin to live life. You see that in Ahsoka Part 5.
Yeah.
And that might be it. That when that happened, she was able to fully integrate and she began to live. And that was the signifier, was the breath coming out. I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching. Could be. But it was intentional, and I want to know why. So I'm going to watch a little bit closer.
I definitely want to go deeper on that dynamic of May and Osha and the dark and the light and not being able to overcome negative, or Kymir saying to lean into your hatred. Like I think there's a lot more to explore there in the sense of them being twin or two pieces of the same being. I think there's a lot more to explore there with that dynamic.
Yeah. So we'll bullet point a few things as we wrap up here as we near the end. Vanessa recognized Kymir for sure.
Yep.
So it seems now all but obvious that she says later, like he was a former pupil of mine. And so, and she thought he was dead. So maybe she thought that she killed him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something interesting. We find that May ended up surviving Empire Strikes Back style, that she fell and she ended up going down the tube. That's interesting. It seemed to me when Osha finally cried, it was like it was the first time she had cried in forever. It just felt like she was just finally letting go of all that stored emotion. And
it was definitely a relief, like the way that it just kind of like, it kind of like exploded. It was like, God, I've been holding this in for so long.
Now, I mentioned earlier that Soul had a cardinal sin that held him back from being a Qui-Gon Jinn-like character.
Yeah.
And I think that this is indicative of the entire show. I think this is the point of the show. It's what it wants us to recognize. It's that he always thought he was right. That was it.
Yep.
And he felt like because he was always right, that the ends would justify the means, and that he was not going to He was not going to apologize because he did, even in killing your mother, I did the right thing. I saved you. I was right. It's what was good. It's what was right. And he did that until his dying breath.
Yep. Deep down, I know something that nobody else does.
Yes. It's dangerous, man.
Yeah.
You can't. I say you can't. We can't. I can't. None of us can go through life thinking that we know what's right and everyone else should listen to us. And therefore, if we know what's right, it'll just lead you to do some crazy stuff. And, and a lot of times, the thing that you see, Obi-Wan says, you've become the very thing that you sought to destroy. That's what ends up happening if you're not careful. Let's say there's someone that there's people always use the paradox of like, not paradox, but just like the idea of would you kill a baby Hitler? It's like, it's tough. On one hand, you want to kill him because he killed so many people, but in doing that, you've become a murderer yourself. And of course, you can use your numbers and you can justify it however you like, sure. But the idea that that's what can sometimes happen is you become the very thing that you would destroy. Wild. It's interesting that later they end up at the Bunta tree, which that scene was beautiful, by the way. And they say, when they find out how powerful you are, they'll kill you just like they killed our mother. And it's the decision is made that Osha is going to get trained by Chimere. She is the Acolyte. We get the answer. And that May has to get her memory wiped. And there's a beautiful scene where they kind of recite the poem and they can't remember who came up with the poem. And maybe it's because maybe they both did. Again, like they're the same person. Again, the show seems to be really talking about this idea of embracing your light and your dark sides both. And I think that's probably, what...
Difficult to see. Always emotion is the future. Meditate on this. I will.
If we get another season, that seems endgame. That Osha and May would come together and become one person. Maybe at that pit, maybe they use the Virgins to combine and become, an all-powerful Force user. I don't know.
I was kind of waiting for that to happen in this episode. I thought once they realized that they were going to fuse together somehow, or one was going to like fade away and the other one, but
it. And she says, "I'll find you," which is beautiful. It was just beautifully done. And so we can imagine that's going to be a big part of the next season, even as she trains in the dark side. That closing shot as it faded out of the Bunta tree and the strings are playing. It was that shot of them, together holding each other with Chimere there. It was really an interesting shot because it felt so beautiful and so emotional. But it's like, but the dark side guy's right there.
But the bad guy,
It was so effectively done. We end up at the end. Vernestra, what do you think about what Vernestra did to our boy Sol?
So dirty. It was fun. It was ironic because it just like perpetuates the idea that it's just like more lies and more like twisting of the truth to satisfy you, and more self-righteousness of I know better. I get why she did it, I guess, but it just it further perpetuates the idea that the Jedi are above everything else, and this will ultimately be their downfall. Is that you think you're so exempt from you're above the rules in a way where you can manipulate things as you see fit.
Right.
It goes back to what Rancor was saying with it'll eventually cause you to break because you can't keep your emotions in check.
Yeah.
That is emotion led. Vernestra being so sure of herself and afraid to be wrong, and afraid of like the fallout of it. It's like no. I'll just keep this all under wraps. I'll keep this under the rug. As a sidebar, I'm very curious as to how Yoda himself did not sense any of this going on, or maybe he didn't.
Maybe he did. Yeah, who knows? So I got one last clip. And if this isn't the pot calling the kettle, if this isn't criticizing someone using the same words that you should be taking to yourself.
Sol made a mistake. A mistake he lived with for so long, it twisted his mind. He justified every selfish step. with the love he had for your sister.
There you go.
My sister?
Her sister that she no longer remembers. Man, wild. That's exactly
Sums
what
it up.
Vernestra's doing,
Yeah.
right? Like her mind has become twisted because she's kept this lie going for so long, and I think that's a relatable thing. Sometimes we have this spinning plate and we're trying so hard to spin it. It's like, just let the plate fall. Just let it crack.
Man.
You'll have so much more fun when that plate cracks. Just let go of the control. What are you doing?
I'm working on this a lot in my own personal life, is releasing that control, because
very relatable. Yes.
You can imagine that sigh of relief when you just stop trying to be in control of everything. But I will say, I did not like Soul in a like goofy kind of I had higher expectations for you kind of way.
Yeah.
I did not like Vernestra at all.
You always hated Vernestra.
Dude, it's something about
you
Green.
Call her Vern because she really hates that. So if you really want to like
Vern,
there you go,
with
Cameron.
the stomach problems. It's something about green skin aliens in Star Wars for me, I guess.
Bro, Yoda.
Freaking.
Come on.
Well, no, not Yoda. I'm just talking about. I'm talking about.
I know you're talking about Lizard.
I'm trying to blank.
Sid.
I'm trying to block
Sid,
her name
your
from my
favorite.
brain. Yeah,
Sid.
Sid and Vernestra. Get them out of here.
So let's talk about the closing scene. Vernestra. Essentially, there's another acolyte. Really, when you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
May becomes Vernestra's acolyte. Really, she's like acolyte.
We're starting to talk about drums.
Talking about snare drums. Over here.
Where's your acolyte?
I keep my acolyte tucked away in a hidden compartment in my car just in case I need it.
I actually played mine on a gig last night.
There you
by
go.
The way.
Great sounding snare drum. If you're not familiar with it, listening audience, I know this is riveting. But no. So Vernestra recruits May, and I'm all for that. I would love to see Vernestra and May essentially chasing after. It's like the invert. Like next season would be the opposite of this season.
Yeah.
And I love that idea because May is essentially going to be indoctrinated into the Jedi. Like it's wild. It's so interesting to me.
I can't make sense of that because it's like we're figuring out that, okay, maybe it can be too late to train someone as a Jedi.
Sure.
So it's like, are you just going to repeat the same exact thing? But I think with her being more of an acolyte, I think she's going to be more Jedi adjacent rather than
civilian helping out. They're using her as an asset. So
it'll be interesting to see how as she gets better, as she helps more, how Vernestra is going to be able to like keep her force sensitivities under wraps.
That'll be interesting.
More lies.
That'll be interesting. Yes. So then we'll have that to look forward to, and we'll speculate about season 2 next week when we go over our thoughts of the entire show, entire series. We'll go really in depth. We're going to try to make some connections that maybe we missed the first time. Now that we have the full story, listening audience, please send us in your thoughts on the whole season. You can always record a voice memo, send it to starwarsafterparty@gmail.com. You can write it in if you feel more comfortable doing that. But I want to know all your thoughts. Get them into that email, and you'll be on the show.
Yeah.
And so we'll definitely break it down. Make sure that you're following along. We see this closing shot with Osha and Kymir holding hands, kind of, but it's around a lightsaber, so it's like it's romantic, but it's also more like we're really wrapping ourselves around this dark side thing, which I'm here for it. I'm here for it in all the ways. Bring romance back to Star Wars. We never have seen a dark side romance. I'm really, really interested in that. It cannot end well. It can't end well.
Nope.
And I'm here for it. Final scene. I just have to say it like this. The tease is there are a lot of people that hate this show. If you bring Plagueis, Yoda, leave all that stuff on the table with Osha and May, and there's no season 2, everyone will hate this show.
Yeah.
I'm really not looking forward to the fact that they might solo to us with this. Because eventually they're going to pick up that Darth Maul Kira thread. That'll happen in a comic book or a show or whatever.
God, I can't wait.
And I can't wait for it. I was just talking with Caleb about this the other day. But back to this. If they don't tie this up, I will riot. And I'm just interested. I feel like the show will be we'll talk about it next week. But I feel like a season 2 would be even better. And yes, it would be even crazier on social media. I think ultimately all they care about, if you're talking about the show and it's getting lots of minutes watched, they're going to renew it. Sorry, don't know what to say.
Yeah.
If you don't like the show, the best thing you can do is not watch it and not talk about it. A little friendly advice. I'm
There you go.
just saying, if you don't want it to get renewed, stop talking
Tyler
about
with
it.
hot takes on this episode.
I don't think it's a hot take.
No,
I think
I know.
You know, if you have social
Well,
media
you're right, yeah.
engagement and it's driving the cultural conversation,
Yep.
people are going to check it out and they might go, I didn't think it was that bad.
All press is good press, right?
All press is good press as long as you spell the name right. So the final scene, Yoda, I got to say, for the 3 seconds that we saw, I loved it. I love the way his ears and it's just like the little, it was perfect Yoda. I loved it. Granted, it's a lot easier to probably just do the back of his head, but it was great. I saw it and I felt like I was 8 years old watching The Empire Strikes Back. It was awesome. Yes, it was 3 seconds. Yes, it could totally suck if they did a full season of it. I get it, but I loved it. And I'm just throwing that out there.
You think they reused the Grogu prop with some like gray hair blasted on it?
No, I don't. I think that whatever they might have done in The Last Jedi, they might have used those same assets. 'Cause it reminded me of that.
Likely.
I love Yoda in The Last Jedi. The greatest teacher of failure is... Sorry, I can't do a Yoda, but it was just fun, so I gave into it. Man.
That's pretty good.
Oh, thanks. I'll probably listen back and be highly embarrassed, but it's all good. Dude, that's The Acolyte.
That's all I got.
That's the finale. That's all we got.
For this week.
Yeah. But we will be back next week. Anything else before we wrap this thing up?
Nah, man.
All right, let's land this ship. We're going to be back in 1 week. Are you? Are you subscribed? Are you following along? Maybe you are. If you are, how about 5 stars to help your boys out? If you don't think we're a 5-star show, I ask that you simply refrain in rating. If you listen this far, you're probably not giving us a 1 star. If you're giving us that 1 star, you probably did that in the first 10 minutes of my early rant.
Sure.
Think about So if you're listening now, if you're listening now, you can leave a rating. I think that you're going to leave 5 stars, and I'm cool with that. No, seriously, we want to hear from you. Write in. I can't wait to talk more with you next week. How about you?
Yeah,
You excited?
I'm excited.
Man, season 2 seems like it should happen, but we'll see. We're going to look into the news, look into the press. We're going to rewatch, and we'll be back next week. Until then, Tyler out.
Cameron out.